In my previous life, my husband's poor management led to the bankruptcy of his company. He took poison and committed suicide in front of me, along with my mother-in-law, father-in-law, eldest uncle, second uncle, 7 family members in total. Unable to bear the shock, I fainted. When I woke up again, all 7 members of my husband's family had already been cremated. Before I could even grieve, the loan sharks came knocking at my door again. Only then did I realize I had become the sole survivor of this family. 10 years later, as my hands trembled while repaying the last debt, I discovered their family of 7 reappearing in the now empty house. Suyi dropped a dollar bill at my feet, thanking me for helping them pay off their debts over the years. Watching the petty man brimming with pride, I finally couldn't hold back and spat out blood, dying from sheer rage. When I opened my eyes again, I had returned to the day my husband went bankrupt. 1. Suyi's tear-streaked face appeared before me, every word dripping with sorrow. Xiaoye, I know I've wronged you. It was my fault for practicing favoritism and mismanaging the company, leading to its bankruptcy and leaving us with astronomical debts. His hands trembling, he pulled out a blue glass bottle, crudely marked with a skull, as if afraid people wouldn't recognize it as poison. Xiaoye, I'm sorry, we truly have no way out now. Death is our only atonement, he spoke while giving me a deep look. Then he resolutely raised the glass bottle and began gulping it down loudly. Xiaoyu, I hope you can forgive me. Suyi spat out blood, collapsed to the ground writhing in pain, yet his eyes remained fixed on me with profound intensity. Seeing this all too familiar scene from my memories, I suddenly realized I had been reborn on the very day 10 years ago when the nightmare began, in my past life. My husband stubbornly followed his own path, appointing only his relatives and friends, driving the company into ruin. I pleaded with him countless times, but in the end, it only turned us into bitter enemies. In a fit of anger, the two stopped communicating with each other. Unexpectedly, a year later, my husband actually showed up at my door with his father, mother, eldest uncle, second uncle, all 7 members of his family. My husband wept bitterly, filled with remorse, and drank poison right in front of me. Even in his dying moments, he kept begging for my forgiveness. Before I could react, all 7 members of his family took poison simultaneously, resulting in an extremely tragic scene, watching my once beloved husband die painfully before my eyes. With all 7 family members perishing simultaneously, brought tears streaming down my face. Not only did I forgive all my husband's faults, but I was also overwhelmed with grief and filled with deep regret. Finally, consumed by sorrow, I fainted directly into unconsciousness. When I woke up, I realized my sister-in-law Susie had already had all 7 members of their family cremated at lightning speed. Before I could even begin to process this immense grief, I was shocked to discover that loan sharks' enforcers had already stormed past the threshold. They stood menacingly at the doorway, surrounding it with fierce expressions. It was then that I was shocked to learn Suyi had actually accumulated debts as high as 100 million, and among this family, I was the only surviving debtor left. No matter how unwilling I was, legally I had to bear all responsibility. Otherwise, I'd be rotting in prison forever, helpless. I had no choice but to sell my villa and company to repay the debts. They even sold their parents' company and house together. Later, I worked day and night, holding down 3 jobs at once, scrimping and saving. And it took me a full 10 years to pay off the last penny. Just as I tremblingly handed over the final payment, thinking everything was finally behind me, I suddenly realized that the villa I had sold back then was now home to a loving family. My husband changed his name and identity, embracing his new lover, with a pair of adorable children happily by his side. My in-laws smiled radiantly, looking even younger than me, clearly living a life of comfort and ease. My heart instantly felt as if it had been slashed, bleeding profusely. I remembered my parents, who had passed away prematurely 3 years ago from overexertion while helping me repay my debts. Thinking of these 10 years of toiling day and night, my hair turned grey at a young age, leaving me haggard and worn. Suyi drove off in his luxury car, embracing his charming and delicate young wife. Before leaving, he rolled down the window and looked at me as if I were a fool. He casually tossed a single yuan coin, which fluttered down to land at my feet. "This dollar is to thank you for working so hard to pay off our family's debts." Ha ha ha. Watching the smug, ugly faces of this family reveling in their petty triumph, I felt as though 10,000 arrows had pierced my heart. With a phut, I spat out a large pool of blood and sank into eternal darkness. 2. Slap. I was slapped hard across the face. Before I could steady myself, sharp curses pierced my ears. "You shameless wretch, a day as husband and wife brings 100 days of grace. How could you just stand by and watch my brother die?" Slapped by my sister-in-law, I suddenly opened my eyes wide. What met my eyes was the vicious face of my sister-in-law. You wicked creature." My sister-in-law's voice was piercingly shrill. I looked up to see my elder sister-in-law and younger sister-in-law charging at me like two enraged she-wolves. My sister-in-law Susie, heavily pregnant, was glaring at me with eyes blazing fire, her gaze venomous beyond measure. She pointed at me and scolded angrily, "It's all because of you, this heartless woman. You refused to help us pay off our debts, determined to drive our whole family to ruin. You're nothing but a demon." My other sister-in-law Sophie, dressed provocatively, was also staring at me furiously, her fingers tipped with bright red nail polish jabbing right at the tip of my nose. "You, how heartless you are. Even if my brother argued with you, a day as husband and wife brings 100 nights of kindness. Must you watch them perish completely before you're satisfied?" The barrage of accusations poured over me like a storm, leaving me no time to react. I narrowed my eyes slightly, standing there silently, enduring their insults, appearing as if stunned, yet inwardly letting out waves of cold laughter. In my previous life, it was the same. Everything happened so suddenly. I was utterly stunned by the corpses scattered everywhere, completely at a loss. Just as I rushed over to pick up my husband, my two dear sisters-in-law suddenly appeared out of nowhere. These two had always found fault with me, stirring up trouble over nothing and nitpicking endlessly. When my husband and I reached the point of avoiding each other, their contributions to that outcome were far from insignificant. Now they don't even bother to ask questions before dumping all the blame on me. It was clearly Suyi who ignored advice and mismanaged the business into bankruptcy. Yet those unaware might think I drove them to their deaths. Moreover, Suyi and I have been separated for over a year, according to our previous agreement. In just a little while, the marital relationship can be directly dissolved. Having lived a second life, I finally understood that Suyi had planned it all along. Deliberately timing it right before our marital relationship was dissolved, faking the entire family's death to escape, all just to make me the sole debtor by default. The whole family conspired to orchestrate this scheme. First, the sudden tearful suicide of all 7 family members. Just as I was overwhelmed with shock, they sent 2 sisters-in-law to take turns bombarding me, leaving me tongue-tied and unable to defend myself. Looking back now, their actions were meticulously coordinated, leaving me no breathing room, all to deny me any time to think. 3. Their insults and false accusations continued unabated, with Susie and Sophie blocking my view completely, standing firmly on either side of me. "Shen Yu, if it weren't for my brother's love for you, I'd have called the police and had you arrested today. Shen Yu, give me back my brother, give me back my parents, may you die a horrible death." At this moment, my parents also arrived, seeing corpses and blood scattered everywhere. My naturally timid mother immediately collapsed to the ground, while my father swayed unsteadily, his face ashen with fear. My heart aches unbearably. My parents must be terrified by now. The Su family's scheme is truly vicious. Any kind-hearted person would be shocked to see such a scene of 7 lives wiped out on the spot. In my past life, my entire family lost their composure and were completely manipulated by the Su family, completely unaware that we were step by step walking into their trap. At this thought, a subtle curve formed at the corner of my lips. It seems even the heavens couldn't bear Su Yi's heinous deeds, granting me this rare chance of rebirth. Since this is the case, I absolutely must not waste such a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to thoroughly cleanse every ounce of humiliation I've suffered. My gaze pierced through Su Qian's hair, landing on Suyi lying twisted on the ground in a ridiculous posture. The red paint spewed from his mouth covered the ground, creating a shocking sight. In my past life, it was this vivid red that stung my eyes, preventing me from opening them wide enough to take a proper look. Despite dying from poisoning, each of them had rosy cheeks and bright red lips, as if they were merely asleep. It wasn't until later, when I ended up working as a nursing assistant in a hospital, that I finally understood. The poisoned person not only had a dark complexion and purple lips but also foamed at the mouth, with bulging eyes. It was an extremely horrifying sight. Unfortunately, back then, I was just a sheltered girl who grew up smoothly under my parents' protection, knowing nothing of the world. Even the slightest incident would leave me utterly terrified, let alone a major event involving 7 lives. For, Suyi, how heartless you are. Why did you abandon me like this? I had intended to squeeze out a few tears just for show, but recalling all those bitter days of the past, an overwhelming sense of grievance welled up inside me, and tears began streaming down uncontrollably. With a sudden wail, I pushed Sophie aside and threw myself onto Suyi's lifeless body on the ground. I have only one purpose in doing this, and that is to figure out whether Suyi is pretending to be asleep, or if he has truly been rendered unconscious by something. The 2 daughters of the Su family never expected me to suddenly go berserk and rush out. Su Fei was even knocked aside by me in the chaos, flailing her arms wildly and accidentally pulling her heavily pregnant sister in the process. The 2 were so frightened that cold sweat poured down their backs, barely managing to steady themselves by clinging to each other. By the time we regained our senses, we realized I was already kneeling on the ground, my hands gripping Suyi's neck, shaking him violently up and down. Shenyu, have you lost your mind? My brother is already dead. And you're still treating him like this. Su Qian was terrified and rushed forward to stop me, only to feel a sharp pain in her stomach. He hurriedly covered his mouth and stood rooted to the spot, cursing angrily. I turned a deaf ear, choking Suyi's neck fiercely while slamming his head against the ground. Thud, thud, thud. The rapid succession of thuds sent chills down one's spine. Just hearing the sound was enough to imagine the pain. Suyi, you bastard, wake up. Stop scaring me like this. Wake up right now. I kept cursing through gritted teeth, but to outsiders, it must have sounded like I'd lost my mind from sheer agony. Finally snapping out of her daze, Sophie rushed over and yanked me to my feet. I didn't resist. The corners of my downturned lips curled into a faint smile. I figured it all out. Suyi indeed drank some kind of coma-inducing drug to enhance the effect, plunging himself into deep shock. The others must have achieved the same effect. Who would have thought they'd go to such lengths to frame me? They're really sparing no expense. Shenyu, you bastard, are you trying to kill me? No, I mean, are you trying to desecrate my brother's body? 5. Su Fei, overwhelmed by anger, nearly slipped up but quickly corrected herself, then angrily slapped him. Slap. My entire cheek turned red, leaving 5 distinct finger marks, yet I wasn't angry. Instead, I looked at Sophie and flashed her a bizarre smile. It startled Sophie so much that she gasped, her heart nearly stopping. I was laughing and crying hysterically, appearing utterly deranged. Clearly overwhelmed by excessive stress, my sanity teetering on the edge. At that very moment, a sharp siren sounded outside as an ambulance rushed over urgently. Before it even came to a complete stop, a young male doctor in a white coat hastily jumped out and dashed straight into the hall, without waiting for instructions. He immediately went to the person lying on the ground and began examining them with practiced movements. Pupils dilated, heartbeat stopped, no pulse, clear symptoms of fatal poisoning. The male doctor wore a serious expression as a stream of professional terminology flowed from his lips, clearly and definitively announcing Suyi's death. Upon seeing him appear, Su Fei's enchanting face couldn't help but reveal a trace of restrained joy. It wasn't until much later that I happened to learn this emergency doctor's name was Wu Shuda, and that he was actually Su Fei's boyfriend. At the time, however, their families had long since ceased contact, so no one knew about their relationship. Wu Shuda's identity must have been carefully calculated by the Su family long ago, serving as the most crucial part of their ghostly plan to fake their deaths. I sneered inwardly but deliberately feigned urgency as I spoke to Wu Shuda. "Doctor, my husband might still be alive. Please, hurry and try to revive him." Wu Shuda looked at me with a grave expression. "Madam, please restrain your grief. This is a professional examination, and there is absolutely no mistake." As he spoke, he even reached out to push me aside. "Please step aside and don't interfere with my work. There might still be living patients among the remaining people." Listening to his righteous words, all I felt in my heart was cold laughter. This was precisely how a righteous emergency doctor helped the Suyi family of 7 forge fake death certificates. It also completely dragged me into this vicious trap. I obediently stepped aside, watching as he finished examining each one before solemnly declaring the deaths of all 7 members of the Su family. I secretly pressed the record button on my phone and then walked toward Dr. Wu again. "Doctor, take a good look. I think they're just unconscious, not dead. Please check again, I beg you." Tears streaked my face as I grabbed Wu Shuda's arm and shook it violently. A flicker of guilt crossed Wu Shuda's face, but fortunately, Sophie rushed over just in time to rescue him. "What do you mean? You've killed my entire family. And you still dare not admit it?" She habitually throws mud at me, trying to trap me with such words. "No, little sister, I really think your brothers aren't dead yet. Look. Your brother's arms are still soft, and just now, I thought I saw Mom's eyelid twitch." I spoke urgently, startling Sophie and Susie so much that they quickly grabbed hold of me. "Sister-in-law, you must be mistaken. You're just too heartbroken and seeing things. Besides, they're professional emergency doctors. How could they not tell life from death?" 6. In desperation, Sophie even played the emotional card, reluctantly calling me sister-in-law with great reluctance. As she spoke, Sophie quickly signaled Wu Shuda with her eyes, urging him to quickly issue the death certificate to avoid complications. Wu Shuda, sweating profusely, hurriedly took out the prepared death certificate and began filling it out swiftly with his pen. Death certificates were issued one after another with such ease by him. A cold smile curled at the corners of my lips. In just this short moment, I'd already figured out how to exact my revenge. Suyi wants to pretend to be dead. Then I'll make sure he dies for real. The key to the Su family's scheme against me was this death certificate. And now, it would also be the key to my vengeance. With it in hand, I could, as his lawful wife, righteously send them all to the crematorium and watch them turn to ashes. At this point, Wu Shuda had already prepared the death certificates and directly handed them to me. "Here are their death certificates. Take a good look. In my past life." This thick stack of death certificates was the final straw that shattered my fragile nerves, causing me to collapse under the unbearable pain and faint on the spot. Now, as I look at this stack of death certificates, my heart blooms with joy. This is the scepter guiding me on my path to revenge, the sharpest sword in my hand. "No, this can't be real. You're lying to me, aren't you? Doctor, could you please check again carefully? Maybe there's been a mistake." To heighten the effect and thoroughly ensnare Wu Shuda, I grabbed his arm and pretended to cry out desperately. Wu Shuda's forehead was beaded with cold sweat as he quickly reached out to pull my arm down. Not daring to look me in the eye, he shouted guiltily, "What nonsense are you talking about? How could I possibly have made a mistake? That's absolutely impossible." Sophie and Susie hurried over to hold me back. "Sister-in-law, you're too overwhelmed with grief. Please don't make things difficult for the doctor." I just wanted Wu Shuda's words, so I naturally let go of my arm obediently. With so many people dying at once, I'm afraid it'll be hard to explain later. Shouldn't we call the police first? My terrified expression scared Su Qian and Su Fei almost to the point of mental breakdown. "No," the two of them almost blurted out. "If the police came, wouldn't the fact that a family of 7 was pretending to be dead be exposed? Why? They died in my house. What if you accuse me of murdering them later? What should I do?" I deliberately pretended not to understand and asked, "How could that be? Sister-in-law, we all know they committed suicide. The Su family only has the 2 of us left now. Who would meddle and frame you?" Sophie racked her brains to explain. while Susie was even more direct, pointing at me and starting to scold. Shinyu, what do you mean by this? They've already died tragically enough. And now you want the police to cut them open? You're being too heartless. A barrage of moral arguments came at me, and I immediately fell silent. Well, if that's the case, we won't wait any longer. 7. As I spoke, I took out my phone and directly dialed a number. Hello, is this the crematorium? There's been a sudden mass poisoning incident here involving 7 people. We need you to send vehicles immediately for transport. Yes, the death certificates have already been issued. All family members are present and have no objections. The address is 128 Jianglin Road. Don't ask me how I knew the crematorium's phone number. Later, when I was down on my luck and working odd jobs, I even took shifts as a corpse carrier at the crematorium. Because the salary there is exceptionally high, others simply aren't willing to do it. At first, both Susie and Sophie were completely confused, not knowing what I was actually trying to do. Hearing this, the two finally realized. This despicable woman wanted to burn their entire family alive. No, tell them not to come now, Sophie screamed at me, her face twisted with emotion. She completely ignored me and hung up the phone with a sharp click. Turning to look at me, she asked with a puzzled expression, "Little sister, why? Our family members died so tragically. I simply can't bear it anymore. Do you really want them to keep lying on the floor like this?" "No, that's not what I meant." Sophie was suddenly at a loss for words and didn't know how to continue. She quickly glanced at Susie for help. Susie subtly pointed at the water cup, and Sophie immediately understood. She hurriedly pretended to be concerned and said, "Sister-in-law, you're grieving too much. You need to take care of yourself too. Let me get you a glass of water." With that, she ran to fetch a water cup, while Susie quickly blocked my view. "Shinyu, don't panic about this yet. We're here for you." As daughters of the Su family, how could we stand by and do nothing? Just then, Sophie came over with a glass of water and said gently, "Sister-in-law, drink some warm water to soothe your throat. You're the only family we have left now. You mustn't let anything happen to you. If I didn't know the truth, I would surely be moved to tears." I thought my sister-in-law had finally started treating me as family. I'm certain there's something wrong with this glass of water. It must have been their backup plan all along. In my past life, I was too weak and fainted too early, never giving them the chance to use this trick. With trembling hands, I took the glass and thanked her softly. "Thank you, little sister," then slowly brought the cup to my lips, through the reflection beside the glass. I clearly saw the expectant gazes of the Su sisters and the eerie smiles at the corners of their lips. I sneered inwardly. Just at that moment, my hand trembled, and the cup fell to the ground with a sharp crack, shattering into pieces instantly. "What do you mean?" Sophie was furious, her brows and eyes practically standing on end, as if she wanted to knock me out with a single punch. "This woman is truly a cockroach, impossible to crush no matter what." "Sorry, I didn't mean to." My hands were shaking badly. With a weak expression, I repeatedly apologized, while Susie quickly grabbed her sister's arm, afraid of arousing my suspicion. Just then, the sound of a car came from outside, and a team of staff walked in. "Hello, we're from the crematorium. Are these bodies on the ground the ones needing to be handled?" I lifted my grief-stricken face and weakly nodded. "Yes, these are their death certificates, issued by this emergency doctor." Logically, Wu Daming should have left immediately after issuing the death certificates, but to cooperate with Sophie, he stubbornly stayed put. "No, they can't be taken away yet." Susie was frantic with urgency. 8. The crematorium staff froze. Do we need police involvement? After all, 7 lives were lost, all under unnatural circumstances, so they didn't dare to take it lightly. That's not the case. They truly committed suicide by poisoning due to the company's bankruptcy. I'm their daughter. And there's absolutely no issue here, Sushi quickly explained. Fearing they might complicate matters by calling the police, the person in charge frowned. "If there are no issues at all, and you insist on keeping them here during this peak of summer, then I'll have no choice but to request the intervention of the Epidemic Prevention Department." No, no, no. The 2 Su sisters waved their hands repeatedly. It was one thing after another. Clearly everything had been planned out. So how had it become so full of holes now? I'm the deceased's wife and daughter-in-law. You'd better take him away now. At worst, we can keep him at the crematorium first and deal with it after the memorial service." Seeing that the Sioux sisters were on the verge of fainting from anxiety, my words undoubtedly gave us a glimmer of hope. The two exchanged glances, thinking this arrangement wasn't bad for now, as long as it wasn't burned immediately. Yes, we also agree to take it away now." Hearing these words, a subtle smirk curled at the corner of my lips. Once we reach the crematorium, where I'm most familiar with the procedures, everything will be beyond your control. After obtaining consent from all family members, the crematorium staff stopped wasting time and immediately began moving the body. "By the way, please send one immediate family member to come along in the vehicle. We still have some procedures to complete." After loading the vehicle, the person in charge came over to inquire. Upon hearing this, Sushi quickly volunteered to go herself. No one argued with her. Instead, she held my hand and gave me a long list of instructions. "Elder sister, I'm entrusting Mom, Dad, and Suyi to you. You'll also need to help arrange the memorial service." As she spoke, tears welled up in her eyes again, and she began to cover her face and cry, seeing that the car was about to start. Su Qian quickly broke free from my arm and hurried toward the vehicle. Without a word, I subtly stuck out my foot. Ouch! Susie, who was walking hurriedly, stumbled and fell to the ground, immediately clutching her stomach and moaning loudly. "Susie, what's wrong?" Sophie was terrified and rushed over to help me up, but Susie was in too much pain to straighten her back. "Oh no, could it be that she's gone into labor? Hurry and take her to the hospital. Isn't there an ambulance right here?" I pretended to be concerned and shouted, Yes, Wu Shuda, come quickly and help carry my elder sister into the car." In her panic, Sophie forgot to hide the relationship between me and the doctor. Susie was so frantic that she grabbed Sophie's hand and frantically signaled to me with her eyes. "Sophie, you go to the crematorium in my place. All right, don't worry, I'll handle Mom and Dad. That woman won't be able to stir up any trouble." Sophie wore a venomous expression. Thinking I was just a useless naive fool she could manipulate however she pleased, watching the ambulance speed away, I curled my lips into a smile. Among the Sioux sisters, only Su Qian had any real brains. Sophie was nothing but a paper tiger, all bark and no bite, easy to deal with. Seeing the crematorium staff urging us, Sophie hastily climbed onto a funeral hearse, while I leisurely boarded the last vehicle. That hearse was carrying my husband, Su Yi, 9, gazing at his peaceful face. I couldn't help but sigh. This man's looks were truly exceptional. I'm an absolute sucker for good looks, so back then, I had zero resistance to his deliberate flattery and pursuit. Looking back now, the Su family had long been scheming to get their hands on the Shen family's wealth. I turned my gaze to the person in charge sitting in front. "Hello, may I ask what procedures are needed if I want to arrange for their cremation as soon as possible?" I continued explaining to the other party. "Such a major incident has occurred, and I'm worried it might attract journalists. Surely your crematorium wouldn't want unnecessary disturbances either. The memorial service can always be held after the cremation." The person in charge nodded understandingly. "Normally, we might schedule this for tomorrow, but given the special circumstances, immediate arrangements can be made through expedited procedures." I immediately nodded in understanding. They all died from poisoning, and I don't wish to see them in such a miserable state either. Let's proceed with the special procedure. Cost is no issue. The person in charge's eyes lit up. This was clearly a lucrative deal. He promptly called the manager, and sure enough, confirmation came swiftly. "Madam Shen, how about this? We'll expedite it for you. The cremation will begin in 1 hour, and the fee is 15,000 per person. Does that work for you?" 1 hour? Absolutely not. The longer we delay, the more variables come into play. I made a quick decision, handing the person a stack of money as I spoke. "All right then, if we start the cremation immediately, I'll add another 10,000 per person. You know my sister-in-law has had an issue, and I'm in a hurry to get back to take care of her." Hearing the price double and knowing he could pocket some extra money himself, the supervisor gritted his teeth. "Mrs. Shen, please wait a moment. Let me discuss this with the manager again." I nodded, not worried in the slightest. They would definitely agree. Sure enough, it didn't take long before they responded again, agreeing to fire up the furnace for them immediately. My heart blossomed with joy, but I pointed at my husband with a sorrowful expression and said, "My husband always cared deeply about his appearance. Seeing him like this now, I believe he wouldn't want it either. Could he be the first?" The person in charge gave me a sympathetic glance. It seemed their marital bond must have been strong, and having the whole family perish was truly tragic. Moreover, such trivial matters meant nothing to him. No problem. The hearse drove all the way to the suburban crematorium. As I looked at the familiar building before me, I couldn't help but feel overwhelmed with emotions. In this lifetime, I will personally send Shinyi to hell. From now on, I will live my own life happily and contentedly, never again reduced to carrying corpses in a place like this. Being familiar with the crematorium procedures, I went straight to the incinerator. Meanwhile, Sophie foolishly followed others to handle the paperwork, watching Suyi's corpse being slowly wheeled in. I felt an indescribable satisfaction. "Suyi, weren't you pretending to be dead? Well, I'll make sure you get your wish." I pretended to wipe the bloodstain from the corner of his mouth, only to notice his eyelids flutter slightly. It seemed the sedative was wearing off. Thankfully, I acted just in time. Otherwise, he would have gotten up right away. I knew his consciousness was now half awake, enough to hear me speak. So I deliberately leaned down and whispered softly into his ear, "Suyi, I know you're faking it, but it doesn't matter. I'll personally send you on your way, rest assured." 10. Sure enough, I successfully noticed his fingers twitch slightly. No doubt his heart must be pierced by countless arrows, just like mine was back then. Watching him slowly being pushed into the cremation furnace, a wave of relief, as if from another lifetime, washed over me. Just as the staff member was about to press the button, rapid shouts erupted from outside the door. "No, wait, don't cremate yet." It was Sophie's voice, followed by the door being slammed open with a loud bang, startling everyone who turned their heads in shock. Seizing the only opportunity, I swiftly pressed the button. Having come this far with the joke, how could I possibly give Suyi any chance to come back to life? "Stop, don't cremate him yet," Sophie screamed desperately, her hair disheveled and sweat pouring down her face. All the staff members stared at me in shock, completely oblivious to Suyi flailing his limbs desperately inside the incinerator. Unfortunately, he was instantly engulfed by the flames. The scene was utterly satisfying to behold. It seemed Suyi had completely sobered up from the sedatives, making his conscious burning alive all the more gratifying. No, brother, Sophie, who was facing the incinerator, clearly saw this scene and let out a heart-wrenching and agonized cry, struggling to rush toward the incinerator, only to be stopped by the staff. "Ms. Sue, please accept our condolences. We understand your pain. But you cannot disrupt our work," the staff member said sternly. "No, my brother isn't dead yet. Stop what you're doing." The staff member turned around but saw nothing, then said displeasedly, "Miss Sue, please don't talk nonsense. There's no way we'd cremate a living person." At that moment, stumbling footsteps sounded at the door. "Wait, my son isn't dead yet." An old woman, disheveled and battered, stumbled in. Perhaps the effects of the sedatives hadn't fully worn off, as she could barely walk steadily, a corpse coming back to life in broad daylight. Even the crematorium staff were terrified, screams erupting everywhere. Seeing the raging flames inside the incinerator, the old woman collapsed to the ground. Then I looked at myself with hatred all over my face. "You poisonous woman. You burned my son alive." "Mom, the doctor had already issued a death certificate. That you could come back to life can only be called a miracle," I explained tearfully. I felt deep regret. Who would have thought this old woman's constitution was actually so strong? Any later and she would have been in the incinerator. But perhaps it's for the best, forcing me to watch my own son die, then spend the rest of my life burdened with so much debt. That's truly worse than death. "My son, you died so tragically, you poisonous woman." This was clearly murder. The old woman had just been ravaged by the knockout drug, and upon waking up, she suffered such a heavy blow that she couldn't hold on any longer and immediately fainted. Sophie was also terrified and quickly picked up her mother, causing immediate chaos at the scene. Due to this unexpected turn of events, the remaining people could no longer proceed with the cremation. But for me, this was no longer important. I immediately called my father. Dad, listen to me. The Suyi family faked their deaths. They owe 100 million in loan shark debts and want to pin it on me. In my past life, it took me 10 years to figure all this out, but now I won't let it happen again. Several tens of millions of that were borrowed recently, which they plan to squander themselves. Get someone to investigate right away and transfer the money back. My father was originally a somewhat well-known local entrepreneur. If I hadn't fallen in love with a Phoenix man who swindled away a significant amount of money, we wouldn't have ended up unable to repay even the 100 million yuan in high-interest loans. Hearing my words, he immediately snapped out of it. Don't worry. I'll take care of this matter right away. After entrusting the matter to my father, I waited calmly for the police to arrive. I intended to use this time to stall all members of the Su family, preventing them from having any opportunity to transfer funds. With lives at stake, the police quickly arrived at the scene. After some investigation, the Su family's collective pretense of poisoning themselves could no longer be concealed. The facts proved that Suyi had indeed been burned alive. However, the crematorium bore no responsibility, as everything had followed proper procedures. Moreover, the situation was chaotic at the time, and no one knew for sure who pressed the button. The matter of Wu Shuda collaborating with the Su family to fabricate false documents could no longer be concealed. And the recording I had perfectly absolved me of any responsibility. You bastard! Why did you issue a fake death certificate? Why did you kill my husband? He was still so young, I shouted first, lunging at Wu Shuda to pummel him. It wasn't me. Sophie made me do it. I was forced. Wu Shuda knew his medical career was completely ruined, and he would face prison time. He glared at Sophie with venomous hatred, determined to drag her down with him no matter what. You bastard, it was all your terrible ideas. If it weren't for you, how would our family have come up with such a scheme? How could my brother have died because of this? Sophie, who had never been the sharpest tool in the shed, immediately started cursing and blurted out everything without thinking. I wept pitifully beside them, tears streaming down my face like pear blossoms in the rain. It's all your fault. You killed my husband. I'm also skilled at framing others and speaking with feigned innocence. From beginning to end, I've been nothing but a pitiful victim, completely unaware, manipulated like a puppet by that entire family. As for the matter of me secretly offering extra money to jump the queue, no one at the crematorium dared to speak up, as they were all trying to avoid responsibility. All members of the Su family except Su Yi were rescued. However, after leaving the hospital, they would face an even more embarrassing situation, a staggering 100 million in usurious debts, along with charges of conspiring to fake death to evade responsibility, falsifying company accounts, and other crimes. Su Qian, who was already experiencing signs of miscarriage, heard about these distressing family matters. In a fit of anger and anxiety, the child was also stillborn. Not only was Wu Shuda stripped of his medical license, but he was also prosecuted for falsifying documents and harming others. Sophie was also imprisoned for her involvement in the conspiracy. When accountability was pursued afterward, including myself, there were still 7 debtors left in the company. I was the only one who hadn't been involved in any business operations, so the court discretionarily assigned me a debt of 10 million. Meanwhile, Father Shen managed to recover 50 million from Su Yi's secret account right away. The funniest part was that this secret account was actually opened under my name. I didn't even need to change it. On the day Su Yi was buried, a light rain fell continuously. The Su family members were either arrested or ill, and shockingly, not a single person came to see him off. I stood quietly before his tombstone holding a black umbrella, my gaze calm and distant. Su Yi, rest assured, I'll spend the remaining 40 million properly on your behalf. A trace of gratified smile slowly surfaced in my eyes. I'll find someone I love, have 2 adorable children, enjoy family happiness with my parents, and see all the beautiful scenery this world has to offer. Staring at the black and white photo on the tombstone, I murmured softly, so everything was your own fault. You brought this upon yourself, and now there's no saving you. With a cold laugh, I let go, allowing the black umbrella in my hand to be blown away. As if carrying off all the suffering of my past life, those unbearable years can no longer haunt my nightmares. Looking up, the rain has stopped and the sky cleared. A brilliant beam of sunlight falls on my exquisitely beautiful profile, with a radiant smile. I turn and stride quickly toward my parents waiting in the distance, where a brand new life awaits me.